Donald Trump's boycotting the G20.
The United States is not participating in official talks.
Death, death, death.
In May, Trump confronted South Africa's president with false claims of genocide against white South African farmers, and later called it a disgrace it's hosting the G20.
Because what's happened there is bad. I'm not going. I told him I'm not going. I'm not going to represent our country there.
The UAE is now promising to invest more than $90 billion into Canada's economy, with $23 billion for specific projects. Carney's now taking his pitch to other countries on the sidelines of the G20. Trump not being there removes a big center of attention.
If part of the goal for Mark Carney at this summit is to have meetings with key countries that Canada is trying to deepen its trade partnerships with, like South Korea, like Indonesia, India, and others, then Trump's absence may, in some ways, actually create some space for that.
Prime Minister Mark Carney and a group of a dozen world leaders here at the G20 issued a joint statement aimed at Donald Trump. The U.S. president isn't here. He's boycotting this summit over his issues with South Africa. The leader's statement says that Trump's plan to end the war in Ukraine requires additional work. His plan includes calling on Kyiv to cede territory, accept limits to the size of its military, and not to join NATO. Those are long-standing Kremlin demands. The leader's statement says that borders must not be changed by force and that limiting Ukraine's military would leave it vulnerable to future attack.
If any Ukrainian leader were to sign up for even a part of this so-called plan, it would be the end of Ukraine as we know it. Game over for a sovereign Ukraine.
We begin overseas in Johannesburg, South Africa, where leaders of the G20 are meeting, and Prime Minister Mark Carney has just met with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Now, Carney welcomed the face-to-face meeting and said discussions on trade matters were moving along well, but there were also pressing geopolitical issues to tackle. Here is some of that conversation between the two leaders.
One of the things I just underscore more broadly is that the leadership you've had with President Macron of the Coalition of the Willing, of which Canada is a part, is an important component of the potential and necessary peace process.
Our task is to ensure that Canada doesn't only endure this shift, but that we prosper under it. And that demands a new economic strategy. That's why Canada is signing new deals with new partners, diversifying our trade and attracting billions of dollars of new investment into our country.
Ukraine must be making decisions for its own future in terms of its own territorial integrity, in terms of its boundaries, in terms of its people.
Canada's relationship with India has been strained after former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stood up in the House of Commons and said there were credible allegations that agents of the Indian government were involved in the assassination of a Canadian Sikh leader. Since then, Carney has sought to reset trading relationships with India, stating that the country could be a reliable trading partner.
Trump boycotted the G20, calling South Africa's hosting a disgrace because of his false genocide claims against white farmers. While he threw his tantrum from Mar-a-Lago, Mark Carney quietly executed the most strategic play in Canadian diplomatic history. He secured a $90 billion UAE investment deal, forged new climate finance alliances with a dozen world leaders, and positioned Canada as the stable North American partner while America creates chaos. Trump's absence created the perfect opening for Canada to reshape global economic partnerships. This wasn't just diplomacy, folks. This was Canada announcing its independence from American economic dominance. Carney's strategic masterstroke at G20. Let me break down what actually happened in Johannesburg, because the mainstream media completely missed the significance of Carney's speech. He delivered what he called a climate competitiveness strategy, positioning climate action not as some moral burden, but as Canada's path to economic dominance. His exact words were that addressing climate change is both a moral duty, but also a commercial imperative that will make our businesses stronger. The $90 billion UAE investment commitment isn't just money, it's a complete restructuring of Canada's economic partnerships. $23 billion is earmarked for specific projects, meaning this isn't vague promises but concrete infrastructure deals. The UAE sees Canada as the reliable, stable partner in North America, while Trump threatens trade wars and isolationism. But here's the genius move nobody's talking about: Carney's blended finance pitch to world leaders. He's essentially offering an alternative to US-dominated financial systems. While Trump raged about South Africa hosting the summit, Carney was building a coalition of countries ready to move beyond American economic hegemony. Look at his bilateral meeting schedule: France, the EU, UK, Germany, Norway, and India. That's not random networking, that's systematic alliance building. Each of these meetings was about reducing dependence on US markets and creating new trade partnerships that bypass American volatility. Carney used Jamaica's hurricane devastation as his case study. Hurricane Melissa wiped out 40% of Jamaica's GDP in one storm. Jamaica had spent years reducing their debt to GDP ratio by over 50 percentage points through remarkable fiscal discipline. One hurricane erased all that progress. His message was crystal clear: countries need alternatives to U.S. aid and U.S.-dominated disaster response systems. The forest fire example was equally devastating. 2 years ago, Canada's wildfires alone made Canada the fourth largest carbon emitter globally. Forest fires destroyed an area bigger than Sierra Leone. Carney thanked South Africa, Mexico, and other countries for sending firefighters to help, pointedly not mentioning any American assistance. The subtext was obvious: Canada's building relationships with countries that actually show up. His push for high-integrity standardized carbon markets isn't environmental virtue signaling, it's economic warfare. He's creating financial incentives that shift capital flows away from U.S.-controlled systems toward countries most affected by climate change. When he suggested making AI data center development carbon neutral, he was directly challenging American tech dominance. The carbon pricing discussion was another strategic shot. Carney praised the European Union's carbon pricing and border adjustment mechanisms while knowing Trump opposes any carbon pricing. He's aligning Canada with EU trade policy, creating the foundation for a transatlantic partnership that excludes America. Throughout his speech, Carney emphasized international collaboration through early warning systems, satellite partnerships, and disaster response coordination, all without mentioning American leadership or participation. He's systematically building a global network where Canada leads and America follows, or gets left behind entirely. The wildfire satellite system Canada's implementing as part of G7 commitments positions Canada as the global leader in disaster monitoring technology. Countries will depend on Canadian systems for early warnings, making Canada indispensable to global climate resilience. This G20 performance wasn't just about climate policy. It was Carney announcing Canada's emergence as a major global power while America retreats into isolationist chaos. The geopolitical earthquake nobody saw coming. Trump's G20 boycott just cost America more global influence than any trade war or diplomatic blunder in recent history. While he was tweeting about South African farmers from his golf course, the rest of the world was making decisions about the future without American input. That's not just embarrassing, it's catastrophic for U.S. global leadership. Here's what Trump missed by throwing his tantrum. Carney joined 12 other world leaders in issuing a joint statement that essentially told Trump his Ukraine peace plan is garbage. The diplomatic language was requires additional work, but in international relations that's code for this is completely unworkable. Trump's plan demands Ukraine cede territory, accept limits on military size, and abandon NATO membership. Basically, every demand Putin's been making since 2014. The joint statement said borders can't be changed by force, and limiting Ukraine's military would leave it vulnerable to future attacks. Carney's exact words were brutal. If any Ukrainian leader were to sign up for even a part of this so-called plan, it would be the end of Ukraine as we know it. Game over for a sovereign Ukraine. That's Canada's Prime Minister directly contradicting the incoming U.S. President on the world stage, with 11 other leaders backing him up. Think about the optics here. Trump boycotts the summit because he's mad about South Africa. So world leaders just proceed without America and reject his foreign policy agenda. That's not leadership. That's irrelevance. Canada stepped into the vacuum Trump created and emerged as the voice of Western values and Ukrainian sovereignty. But the Ukraine statement was just the beginning. Carney's trade diversification strategy is systematically reducing Canadian dependence on U.S. markets, and he's doing it openly at international summits. Remember Trump's threats about tariffs and trade wars during his first term? Canada just found their insurance policy. The $90 billion UAE deal, the European partnerships, the climate finance alliances. These aren't just economic opportunities, they're strategic hedges against American economic warfare. Other G20 leaders are taking notes. When the U.S. president can't even show up to international summits because he's feuding with the host country, how can anyone rely on American leadership? Carney positioned Canada as the stable, predictable alternative. While Trump creates chaos and uncertainty, Canada offers consistency and reliability. The timing was perfect political theater. Doing this while Trump wasn't physically present meant no dramatic confrontations, no Twitter meltdowns disrupting the summit, no American delegation trying to undermine Canadian initiatives. Carney had a clear field to build his coalitions and announce his partnerships without interference. The forest fire cooperation example perfectly illustrates the shift. When Canada needed help fighting unprecedented wildfires, South Africa, Mexico, and other countries sent firefighters, not America, these other countries. Carney's thanking them publicly at the G20 sends a clear message about who Canada's real partners are when crisis hits. The carbon pricing discussion was another strategic masterstroke. By praising EU carbon border adjustments, while knowing Trump opposes carbon pricing entirely, Carney's aligning Canada with European trade policy. That creates the foundation for transatlantic partnerships that explicitly exclude American participation. Trump's climate denial isn't just environmental policy, it's economic isolation. Canada's new global power position. These G20 partnerships represent more than diplomatic wins. They're quantifiable economic and strategic advantages that position Canada at the center of the global transition. The $90 billion UAE commitment alone exceeds most countries' annual GDP. That's not aid or loans. That's direct investment in Canadian infrastructure, technology, and resources. Carney's climate finance leadership puts Canada at the center of a $1 trillion global transition. His blended finance proposals and carbon market initiatives mean Canadian institutions will help channel massive capital flows toward climate adaptation and mitigation projects worldwide. When countries need financing for renewable energy, disaster resilience, or green infrastructure, they'll come through Canadian-led systems. The AI data center, carbon neutrality proposal positions Canada ahead of American tech policy. While U.S. companies resist environmental regulations, Canada's offering a framework that makes clean tech commercially attractive. International businesses will choose Canadian partnerships over American ones because Canada provides regulatory certainty and environmental credibility. This G20 performance clearly sets up Carney's future political ambitions. He's demonstrating global leadership, economic vision, and diplomatic skill on the world stage. Whether he runs for Liberal leadership or pursues other political opportunities, he's established himself as Canada's international statesman, while Trudeau handles domestic politics. The broader pattern is unmistakable. Canadian leaders are stepping up while American leadership becomes unreliable and chaotic. From Freeland's trade negotiations to Singh's climate initiatives to Carney's international finance work, Canada's political class is filling the vacuum Trump's isolationism creates. Other countries are noticing and responding accordingly. The irony is perfect. Trump's isolationist tantrums and diplomatic boycotts are creating exactly the space Canadian leaders need to build global influence. Every summit Trump skips, every alliance he abandons, every partnership he destroys becomes an opportunity for Canada to expand its international reach and economic partnerships. Conclusion. This wasn't just a speech. It was Canada announcing its independence from American economic dominance while the U.S. retreats into isolationist chaos. While Trump raged about South Africa from Mar-a-Lago, Carney was building the future of international cooperation in climate finance. The $90 billion UAE deal alone proves other countries see Canada as the reliable North American partner they can actually count on. Drop a comment if you think Trump's going to lose it when he finds out about these deals. Hit subscribe for more coverage of how Canada's quietly becoming a major global power.